Hello all, this is the Owl, and today, oh boy, there's a term that I bandy about occasionally in reference to a really surprisingly common subgenre within horror manga. It's something that I'm sure anyone who is a fan of the, shall we say, darker and crazier side of manga will be familiar with. In this genre, the story takes the form of your standard monster apocalypse story. You know, X thing suddenly becomes monstrously powerful and an existential threat before taking over the world or wiping out humanity. However, in this subgenre, well, replace the monsters with a benign, often intensely Japanese or culturally significant phenomenon or item. This may range from magical girls, to goldfish, to chickens, really? To animals with human faces, because you can get drugs in Japan if you look hard enough. I've referred to these in the past as what the fuckalypse stories. Yes, I'm still intensely proud of that term, so I'm going to use my monthly cuss budget on this video, and they are very much their own thing, with their own fan base, tropes, and even internal references, but are mostly characterized by paper-thin human characters dying in extremely gory and creative ways at the hands of whatever quirky horror is attacking the world today. There are, again, some other fun tropes, but we'll get into those a bit later. The reasons as to why this is a thing are, honestly, something someone should write a paper on, but it's clearly something within the Japanese subconscious, because these are actually quite prolific, and have been for the last 20 years. Today's entry, however, may be one of the most what the fucky of the entire what the fuckalypse genre. And because I try to honor patron requests as best I can, today we're looking at Pygmalion. Yes, that one. The one with the mascots. Written and drawn by Chihiro Watanabe, who, you know, the only thing I can find out about them is that they worked as an assistant to Kohei Horikoshi. What? On My Hero Academia. What is this world sometimes? And yes, you can kind of tell, as the art style does leak through in places. And it was mostly published as a webcomic before being adapted into volumes. Anyways, it is probably the closest thing we're ever going to get to a Five Nights at Freddy's manga, unless they update that upcoming movie. And yes, I know, it's a reach, but it is in at least a tangential headspace. Regardless, trust me, if the entire concept sounds odd, that's only the tip of the oddberg. What do I mean? Well, our story opens on a mascot festival in Japan. Thousands of different mascots from different prefectures gathering and greeting people, mostly kids. Keigo Aihara, our, well, protagonist is a strong word for a character this bland and pointless. Protagonish? Yeah, I rather dig that. Is there, with obvious love interest character Ako and his mascot-obsessed younger brother, Makoto. And you know this exact character dynamic before you read this. Stalwart, grumpy main character who's a really nice, dutiful guy under the pineapple, warm-hearted big sister energy girly with a soft side, and a boisterous and ever so slightly childish for his age younger brother with an impossibly pure nature. But that's fine. This sort of story isn't exactly a character study unless it's a study on internal human anatomy. I will say that this manga is genuinely impressive in terms of how well it captures the, frankly, utterly bonkers nature of mascot culture in Japan. And, oh right, I should probably address the guy in the elephant costume in the room. Japanese mascots are one of the many, many things that, even as someone who lived there for most of his adult life, makes me throw up my hands and go, I have no idea why it is like this. See, in Japan, every single prefecture, city, town, corporation, business, school and club is almost guaranteed to have a weird-looking mascot. And I'm not just talking about logos. If you go to any festival in Japan, you will see them walking around. Men and women in wild-ass costumes, wandering around, trailing kids like ducklings. And yes, there is something more than a little bit sus about these mascots. Not only how many of the bastards there are, or how popular they are, but how oddly off-putting their designs can be. I am not going to show many here, but if you Google weird Japanese mascots, you'll see what I mean. Some of them are just terrifying, and others are bizarrely sexual, including one that is a literal anthropomorphic penis. No, I am not kidding. Anyways, yeah, it's a cultural artifact definitely worth addressing, and Pygmalion never actually does that, aside from a throwaway line here and there, and a minor character motivation towards the end. Instead, leaning into its own type of grotesque weirdness and bonkers story that feels like something Hideo Kojima might come up with after a bad night on Bathtub Doboroku. Sure enough, before we're even done with Chapter 1, we get a good look at, yeah, let's be real here, what you are all reading this sort of manga to see. Screaming meatbags, eviscerated by something both hilarious and insane, and Pygmalion has that in spades. This is a gory-ass manga. It's not quite as creatively sick and twisted as something by Kentaro Sato, who may just be the king of the what-the-fuckalypse genre, but it more than compensates in terms of just how graphic it can be sometimes. There's a lot that I can't show you, and more that I'll probably need to censor if I ever do a deep dive on this, especially when the mascots start straight up, killing kids. I'll take things YouTube is not okay with for 50, Alex. Oh right, the art. It's okay, I guess. Some decent expressions and framing, and I guess the gore is pretty good, but weak backgrounds and physics, and an odd sense of scale and space. That said, Watanabe does actually produce some pretty decent panels later on. Regardless, the story gets underway rather rapidly, as all across the country, super strong mascots go kill crazy and begin ripping everyone apart in all sorts of batty ways. Oh, and Makoto is knocked out and presumably injured by one, causing Keigo to go hunting for him rather than evacuating, i.e., it's what lets the plot continue. Things get weirder as the humans attempt to fight back. A bean-themed mascot gets a high-caliber bullet to the dome, but rather than staying down, it regenerates like frigging Wolverine and reveals that nope, this is not someone in a suit who wishes they hadn't gone into hock over that philosophy masters, and instead nightmare fuel monstrosities that merely resemble mascots. Oh, and all of this is being caused, or at least orchestrated, somehow by a specific being in a button gimp mask. And, by the way, this is all in the first chapter because this manga has a serious case of the galloping crazies, and believe me, we're only getting started. After they escape from said mascot, we start getting our core group of survivor characters together, including Takezawa, apparently a cop, and also one of a handful of specific sequences that people who've read this nightmare tend to bring up. After these survivors start to bicker, a tough guy character goes hand to hand with a grotesque butcher mascot who's evidently stuffed full of something, leading to a gloriously macabre panel where the mascot vomits a geyser of people slush all over him, which, yeah, despite this manga's many flaws, stuff like this is why I still have a relatively good time with it, because wow, that's crazy. Yeah, narratively speaking, it's a bit of a mess, but not a total disaster, and there are glimpses of competency in the mess. For instance, several cases of fun foreshadowing, both of horror sequences to come and important story beats, as well as a few character moments that admittedly push right up against schmaltz, but are still kind of fun, and one or two fairly decent attempts at gut punch out of nowhere events. For instance, after finding Makoto, Keigo is badly injured rescuing him, but after the two brothers are reunited, Makoto takes a stray bullet from a sniper, half decapitating him. This honestly caught me off guard when I read through this the first time, although rereading it, yeah, we should have all seen this coming. Anyways, soon the mascot starts spilling out across Japan, and we get to the actual apocalypse part of the story. And, oh yeah, we also get to another wonderful what the fuckalypse trope. That of over-explaining what's causing the phenomenon, while at the same time completely under-explaining it, providing what amounts to an alloy of convenium and weapons-grade hand-wavium. I will give you a spoiler though, it's all nanobots this time, because of course it is, except when it's aliens or secret government lab experiments. Oh, Japan. All of this tied together with a seemingly never-ending stream of overt thematic and lexical resonances with the tale of Pygmalion. That, I guess if you squint hard enough, it's trying to make a point about artificial intelligence, but the reason why they made invulnerable killer mascots is, to my mind, never adequately explained. And if you thought that this was the only trope we were gonna tick off, well, you've never read one of these manga before. The protagonist and his family having a direct connection to what's going on, check. One of the main characters gets attacked, should by all rights be dead, but instead gets a version of the power of what they're fighting, checkity check. Obviously villainous and probably rapey character is trusted way too freely. Well no, okay. Oddly enough, this one is not in the manga, but I would bet you yen to yakisoba that if it had been another volume longer, he'd have shown up. That all said, again, it's not a bad manga at all. Not all tropes are bad, and sometimes a formula exists for a reason, because it, for the most part, works. And while it definitely does make my brain hurt a little bit that the what the fuckalypse is a popular enough subgenre that it can have tropes this common and distinct, well, again, Japan is just like that sometimes. Odd. And likes odd things. Remember, this was basically the Japanese equivalent of the, what's a more recent example? Mrs. Owl wants me to say watermelon sugar, so we'll go with that. Anyways, the story continues to clip along. The self-defense force gets involved, and this goes about as well as you'd expect, although we do learn that even basically reducing the mascots to hamburger doesn't kill them. Kagor meets a few new characters, his quest evolves slightly, we begin to learn the rules of the new status quo, we get some additional twists and turns, things escalate, and, of course, we get a whole lot more blood and guts, with the occasionally truly, almost hilariously shocking scene here and there, including, that bit. A sequence with a pig mascot, which is pretty infamous, and I'll admit, the ending of this bit has to be seen to be believed. It's a kill that I've only ever seen done, twice, but Hellblazer is also a ride. I will say that, while the main character never becomes in any way interesting, there are some interesting moments, and some of the side characters are at least competently written, and the whole thing, while it does feel a touch overlong, even at a relatively svelte 3 volumes, it never feels anywhere near as self-indulgent as a Sato manga. And I won't spoil any more, but that's Pygmalion. It's definitely Pygmalion, and if you can track it down, it's probably worth a read. At least if you're someone who enjoys the odd what the fuckalypse story, warts and all. But there is one problem. While I have heard some rumours of an English hard copy version in the wild, as well as a digital version, and while I can find French and Spanish versions, I cannot, for the life of me, track down a legal English copy of this. So maybe something to hassle, Viz about. That said, if you do happen to stumble across this, I would definitely pick it up, and please let me know in the comments. At the end of the day, Pygmalion is not going to blow your mind, despite its utterly bonkers concept, and some admittedly extremely memorable kills. It's one of those emphatically fine what the fuckalypse stories that will give you a decent ride while you're on it, and mostly vanish from your consciousness after. But I'm not saying it's bad, and I do know that it has a certain cult fandom online. It's probably worth checking out if you can find a copy or speak one of the languages it has been translated into. Folks, let's call it there. Before we finish for the day, I want to give a huge thanks, as always, to my fantastic patrons. Jake Reagan, Piece of Yeast, El Espresso, Cheerful Satanist, Starwin Marwin, Kel Core, Jacob Ramsey, Crazy, James Bakes Bread, Wargle, Lance Goebel, Paul Norberger, Rafferty, Aaron Arnold, The Hedgehog Gamer, Simone, XTC Pill, B Empress, Jake, and Cheshire Quill. If you want to see more like this, why not stick around? Subscribe, bell, you know the drill. If you want to hear me say your name, get early access to most of my videos, have some fun perks on the Discord, and, you know, buy Baby Owl the necessaries and ensure that I can keep on doing what I do, why not take a look at our Patreon? If you want to chit-chat about, well, basically anything, drop by our Twitch. We generally stream on Thursday evenings and Sunday afternoons, and, of course, you could come check out our Discord. Take care, my friends, and cheers. This is the Owl, signing off.